I ate grass in a billionaire's garden. Not because I lost a bet, not for some weird cleanse. I was hungry, and the kitchen was off limits to people like me. If it were you, what would you have done? My name is Maya Williams, and this is the part of my life I never planned to say out loud. I worked in a mansion in Connecticut, where the hedges were cut sharper than the conversations, where the marble floors stayed cleaner than most consciences. I kept my head down, did the work, and mailed every dollar to Atlanta, where my son Elijah was waiting on a heart surgery that kept getting pushed by words like soon and maybe and we'll see. I knew the house rules, sure, but I also knew the rules no one wrote down. The biggest one came straight from the lady of the house, Elaine Fairview. The kitchen is for family, not for the help, not for me. You think a rule like that is silly until your stomach folds in on itself and black coffee is the only thing you ate that day. That morning, the garden looked like a magazine cover. Dew like glass beads, a white fountain that never ran, dry roses that smelled like old money. And I stepped out to pull weeds because at least outside you can swallow your pride without an audience. My hands shook. The world did that slow, floaty wobble it does right before you hit the ground. I crouched, pinched a blade of grass and chewed. One blade, then another. Shame tastes like dirt. You know what I mean. The patio door slid. Shoes on gravel. Maya. It was Charles. The name on buildings, the signature on my checks. The face on glossy magazines people leave in dentist offices. I wiped my mouth so fast a blade stuck to my lip. Before I could invent a lie, Elaine stepped out in a silk robe and a face you could cut paper on. "What are you doing out here with her?" she asked him, like I was stray weather. "I just found Maya on her knees, eating grass," Charles said, voice caught between shock and something else. He said it like the sentence didn't even fit in his mouth. Elaine didn't blink. She looked at me, not at what it meant, just at me. "The kitchen is for family," she said. "We don't have people like her near our food. If she wants to eat, she can bring her own bread. We pay them well enough. People like her." Two words that still managed to do more violence than a fist. I stood up too fast and the world tilted. "Please," I whispered to him, eyes on the floor. "Don't say anything. If I lose this job, my son doesn't get his medicine." Then something I still don't have a name for happened. Charles stepped forward and dropped to one knee, in his own garden. "Forgive me," he said, not to his wife, not to a camera, to me. "Not just for this. For everything I let happen in my name." Pattern interrupt, a billionaire knelt. "Yeah, that happened. That night there was a soft knock on my door. The little room off the back hallway. The brochure calls staff quarters like that, makes the window smaller. It was Charles' hair, damp sweater, no tie, holding a brown paper bag that smelled like soup and saved lives. He set it on the dresser. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't?" I said, arms crossed, because pride doesn't go away just because kindness shows up. "Your wife said the kitchen is off limits." "I don't care what she said," he answered, and he didn't say it with a roar. He said it like a man who'd finally heard his own voice. "I didn't touch the bag." He looked around my narrow room, and I watched a billionaire realize how much of his house he'd never seen. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked. "About your son, about the kitchen, about any of it." "Because poor people don't get to explain," I said. "We get to be silent or we get to be gone. And black women learn early that silence keeps roofs over heads." He nodded slow. "Apologies don't feed children," I added. "Neither does silence," he said. "If it were you, would you take the soup or the risk that came with it?" The next morning, the air in that mansion moved different. Charles called a staff meeting in the East Lounge, the room where donors had clinked glass and said legacy like it was a prayer. Groundskeepers, maids, drivers, the cook, the young houseman, who fixed the things nobody else noticed. We all stood under portraits of people who'd never learn our first names. If you work here, you eat here, Charles said. Period. Designated hours, stocked pantry. If anyone has been punished, denied food spoken down to my door is open. I can't fix what I ignore. We all looked at the doorway like Elaine might sweep in and snap the world back to how it was. She didn't. That afternoon, he met with the family attorney and pulled the household authority, budgets, staff policy, back into his own name. Elaine had managed it for years and swung it like a hammer. He took that hammer away. Then, in his study where the air used to feel expensive, he made me an offer that felt like stepping onto a bridge I couldn't see. I want you to be house manager, he said, hands tight on the chair back. Equal pay, full benefits, real authority. And your wife, I asked. I'll handle Elaine, he said. Everything in me wanted to say no. Safety is powerful when you've had so little of it. But Elijah was 8, tired and brave, and the word surgery kept sitting on my chest. I said I'd think about it. The next morning, he handed me an envelope with a new title and a different number. I took the job. Pattern interrupt the woman who ate grass now had keys to the kitchen calendar. Do you think that's fair? Think, if you're waiting for a celebration montage, pause. Elaine didn't vanish into a puff of humility. She hosted a patio lunch with society friends, poured sparkling water, and painted a picture where she was the victim. I was the manipulator, and Charles was weak. She used pretty words, disruptive energy boundaries, cultural differences. But then a woman leaned in and whispered, "Is it true she was starving?" Another asked, "Did he really kneel for once?" Optics blinked. Then came arbitration. Elaine challenged the restructuring, claimed the household sat inside a marital trust she controlled. Quiet room in Stamford, no cameras, just a table, some files, and the sound truth makes when it finally gets a chair. Staff statements stacked like bricks. Selena showed a little white scar on her knuckle where a slap met porcelain. Raphael talked about getting his pay docked for tracking dirt across marble while fixing the irrigation pipe that watered Elaine's roses. I told them about the garden. The panel ruled for Charles and ordered an HR audit back 10 years. It wasn't victory, it was oxygen. 2 days later, Elijah arrived. Thin, smiling, trying to be brave. I held him and said into his hair, "I told you I'd come for you." Charles arranged a specialist consult in Boston. No press, no strings, just access. For the first time in months, my boy slept without fear humming behind his ribs. Mid-video break. Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. The house wasn't done talking, and neither was its history. The clip that changed everything started where the shame had, in the garden. A few microphones on stands, a handful of reporters, my hands shaking. "My name is Maya Williams." I said I was banned from the kitchen. I ate grass because I thought no one would care. No glam squad, no speechwriter, just truth with its shoulders back. The video traveled. Morning shows, local news, ugly comments, beautiful ones, all of it. That night in the staff lounge, under a hum that never stops, 5 domestic workers I'd never met sat with paper cups and told me their stories. Right there, a foundation began. Legal referrals, emergency grants, a hotline answered by people who knew what a long hallway feels like when you're small. I cleaned out a storage room off the back stairs to make it an office. Tossed cracked binders, wiped dust off shelves that had forgotten sunlight. That's where I found it, a torn roster wedged behind a book. Old staff names with most crossed out, one line that stopped my breath. D. Robbins, terminated. Conflict with Mrs. Fairview, no charges. David Robbins, a butler long gone, a rumor with a shadow. People don't disappear, they get pushed. I showed Charles. He led me to the West Wing. a part of the house that still smelled like cedar and secrets. We followed the old blueprints to a bookcase that didn't quite sit flush, pried it back, and there it was. A door painted shut. We slid a crowbar under the frame and pulled until wood groaned like a thing that didn't want to remember. Inside, a windowless room. A cot, a broken lamp, mildewed rags, and on the far wall, carved in a fading hand, SD was here. I put my palm to the letters and the floor tilted. SD. Sarah Dawson. The name matched a faded photo a man brought me later. Two young black women in crisp uniforms, shy smiles, the corner labeled Fairview, 1971. The man's name was Samuel. My sister, he said, pointing. She never came home. He stood in that little room with me and pressed his hand to the wall and said, she was here, and we all had to sit down, because grief is heavy even when it's 50 years old. That was the twist. This wasn't one woman's cruelty or a single bad rule. This was a system designed, documented, hidden in plain sight. We kept digging. In a basement crate labeled Private FF, Frederick Fairview, Charles's grandfather, Bernard found 3 reel-to-reel tapes and a machine older than all our excuses. We threaded the first tape. A hiss, then a voice you'd recognize if you've ever stood under the portrait of a man who thinks history should thank him. Removed SD from staff registry. Brother arrived unannounced. Took no chances. Staff must understand boundaries. The second E. Sims spoke about wages. Removed. Charles is too soft. Instruct Elaine to reinforce order. The third was the most honest thing a legacy ever said in private. If records surface, deny knowledge. The house must survive even if memory does not. If it were you, what would you do with those tapes? Bury them for the brand, or play them so the dead could breathe. We went public. Not with gossip, with evidence. Charles stood beside me and said the line men like him avoid. I inherited silence and didn't question it. Investors clutched pearls. The board sent a man with a briefcase to ask if the mansion was going to eat the company. Charles told him, my leadership begins at home. If they'd like to talk ethics, I'll invite them to meet the people their profits ignored. That sentence cost him, and he paid it anyway. You know what I mean. The state got involved. Former staff came forward. Our inbox filled with handwriting that shook and refused to shut up. The case built until a courthouse in Hartford felt like a stage where the ending might finally be honest. I wore navy and carried no apology. Elijah stayed home. This wasn't a day for children. Jorge went first. 14-hour days, no overtime, a visa yoked to a family's breath. Estella told them about a guest room turned into a lockbox because a scarf went missing that later turned up in a donor's luggage. Then me. I was told I could work but not eat, I said. Serve but not speak. That my hands were too dark for their food, so I ate grass in a garden of roses and marble. The judge, black woman gray, braids a face that has watched America practice amnesia, leaned forward. What do you want this court to do, Ms. Williams? Name it, I said. Call it exploitation, abuse, racism dressed up as etiquette. Charles took the stand and did the rare thing. Testified against his own name. A well-set table can still serve injustice, he said. Don't destroy the Fairview name. Give it meaning again by holding it accountable. The jury took 2 days to say what the tapes said in 10 minutes. Responsible for systemic labor abuse, unlawful confinement, racial discrimination. Restitution. A statewide registry for domestic worker protections. Permanent memorialization. The judge said, let the record show. Silence is no longer protection, and truth is no longer optional. I wrote that down and taped it to my office wall. We walked out into sun that had the nerve to be beautiful. Reporters yelled about money and reputations. I held up Sarah's photo and said, "We don't bury truth anymore. We raise it." People cried. People argued. That's the thing about truth. It's not polite. Back at the estate, the garden changed without moving an inch. We put a simple plaque near the rosemary, "Let no one ever be invisible again." We opened an archive in the West Wing. The tapes labeled and dated the ledger that carried D. Robbins in crooked ink letters from women and men who worked in houses that were never theirs. We held a quiet ceremony under the elms and read names, not ghosts, people. The kitchen sounded different too. Not just sizzling pans, but laughter that didn't check the doorway first. The foundation grew. 5 cities, 4 states, a network of advocates who answer phones at 2 a.m. because fear doesn't keep office hours. We hosted listening sessions instead of galas. We wrote policy from stories instead of spreadsheets. People started leaving notes at the memorial for Sarah. Prayers thanks a single daisy pressed flat. Elaine came back once. She moved through the foyer like a ghost that didn't know it was one. We sat across from each other in the East Lounge, and she tried to hold the room with posture. "You think you won," she said. "This isn't a contest," I told her. "It's a reckoning." I said I wouldn't humiliate her. That wasn't my work. But I wasn't going to shield her from the consequences either. Later, she left a letter. Not an apology, a surrender. "I am no longer proud of the legacy I defended," she wrote. "Make this place something worth remembering." I tucked it in a wooden box with Elijah's old hospital bracelet and my first house manager paycheck. 10 years passed. The estate had a new reputation, people said, with their shoulders loose. The house that remembered. School kids came to learn the parts of history that don't fit on a brochure. Teenagers listened to a recording of my voice and tried not to care, then cried when they did. On the front path, a brass plaque reads, "Truth has weight, so do those who carry it." Here's the messy part you came for. The part that starts fights in my comments. People ask if I forgave Charles. They want the neat story where a kneel cancels the harm or money erases memory. That's not how any of this works. He did something harder than write a check. He stayed. He used his name to carry freight it should have carried from the beginning. He stood up in rooms that were built for him and said the word wrong. Does redemption count if it's late? Or does late mean it doesn't count at all? People ask what happened to Elaine. I don't know where she lives now. I know she left her pearls and one true sentence. I keep that sentence with the proof because truth isn't only for our friends. It belongs to our enemies too, especially when the enemy is a version of ourselves we swore we'd never be. People ask if I'm still angry. Of course I am. Anger is a smoke alarm, not a furnace. It tells you what still needs your hands. But I'm also full of something I never had in that garden. Peace. Not the peace of forgetting. The peace of remembering out loud. So let me ask you, because stories are bridges, not mirrors. If you saw someone eating grass where you live or work, would you look away? Would you kneel? Then would you stand and change the house? If your last name sat on a building built on silence, would you protect the letters or the lives? If you found tapes like ours, would you bury them to save face? Or play them so the people erased could finally be seen? Stick around this channel. Not just for the views, for the witness. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever worked in a house like mine. Tell me if you left a job because silence was the only benefit they offered. Argue with me if you need to. Say Charles doesn't deserve a second chance, or say I should have burned the place down instead of turning on the lights. Share this with someone who needs a hand, or with someone who needs a mirror. That morning, shame tasted like dirt and fear. Today, truth tastes like warm bread in a busy kitchen where everybody gets a plate. That's the house we're building, together. Pull up a chair, tell your story, and don't you dare be silent.